Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today I'm going to be doing my second part of the review of MYFAROG 3.0. I'm going to concentrate today on character generation. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right in because I want to try to keep this video on the shorter side, hopefully around 20 to 25 minutes. So first thing I'm going to do is for any new players to RPGs, let me just briefly go over the dice. So for RPGs, you're going to find that you need several different Polyhedron dice. And I've always found that it's best to get one of each at least and to have several of certain types. So this is a D4, so its pips run from 1, 2, 3, and 4, obviously. You want to have at least 3 D6, so 3 6-sided dice, a very standard die. I prefer to have 2 of one color and a third in a different color because in some game systems they call for an action die, and that's usually how you differentiate between the 3. A D8, obviously 1 through 8. 2 D10s, once again 2 different colors, so this is a black and a blue. The black one I usually treat as the 10s, and this is the 1s. So you could either roll 1 to 10 or you can roll 1 to 100 if you're using 2 D10s, a D12, and then 2 D20. So these are 20-sided dice, and in most instances with many games you're only going to use 1, but in some more modern RPGs out there, they're using a 2D20 system, and so it's best to have 2. So now that that's set aside, I'll shift those dice over here. So what I'm going to be doing today is I am going to be showing you character generation for MYFAROG 3.0. Now, you probably notice all of these tabs here, and yes, these are different elements of character creation. However, I don't want you to think that it's very complicated, because it's really not. I'll be able to trim down many of these pages. It's roughly 30 pages of character creation, but you don't need to use all 30 pages, and we're going to get right into that as well. So another thing that I did, and I will switch views now to, let's switch views to here. What I have done is I came up with a scratch sheet here so that I can start laying out some of the some of the initial roles and everything, and once that's done, then I will transfer that to the official character sheet, which in this case I'll deal with some of the calculations that you find on the character sheet a little bit later. But initially, one of the first things that the book tells you to do as far as character creation is concerned is to come up with a concept and decide on the concept of your character, and then that is going to allow you to make certain decisions very early on, and I'm going to get into that. So keeping that in mind, my character concept is that I want to play a dwarf character, and so I've already listed the attributes. Now, attributes in this game are listed in alphabetical order, so it's a little different order than what you might be used to seeing. So charisma, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, strength, and willpower. If I am playing a dwarf character, my racial bonuses or minuses are -2 to charisma, +3 to constitution, -1 to dexterity, and a +2 to willpower. So I've already planned that out. I've also written a little chart here so I can keep this in mind when I'm assigning my attributes, and I'll get to that next. So a 6 to 8 is a -1, a 9 through 12 is a 0, a 13 to 15 is a +1, a 16 to 17 is a +2, and an 18 or over is a +3, and when it gets much higher than that, it'll be a +4, and so on. However, a starting character is most likely not going to have the bonuses to go much higher than between 18 or 19 on the rolls. Rolling for attributes is 3d6, and you do it twice for each attribute. So 6 times total. And then you keep the highest of the 2 rolls. So when I rolled this out ahead of time, and the reason why I'm not doing it on camera is because I have a very small space here, no dice cup to hold the things in, and they bounce around a lot. So I pre-rolled. And so my first 2 rolls was a 6 and 11, so I'm going to keep the 11. In this case, I will keep the 8, the 16, the 11, the 9, and the 16. All right, now, according to the rules, I leave this up to the GM. All right, or if I'm the GM, I'll say to the players, they can either roll it straight and transfer them over, or they can assign them as they wish. It really depends on the campaign and the group of characters, group of players that I'm working with. In this case, just for simplicity, I'm going to bring them directly over. So kind of a very old school way. So my charisma is going to start as an 11, but because of the racial attribute, it'll come down to a 9. This 8 will become an 11. This 16 will become a 15. This intelligence will remain at 11. His strength will remain at a 9. And the willpower will come up to an 18. All right, so that's where my character's basic stats are looking like. So now we're going to go to the book. Let me just shift my coffee cup over. And I'm going to go to character creation. So character creation has 14 different steps. Again, I don't want this to sound like it's complicated, because it's all within these 30 pages, and you don't have to do all of these steps. The first one is Haminja. I think I'm pronouncing that right, but if not, maybe somebody can correct me. And it's basically a karma system. So when you create a brand new character, your character will start with a number of karma points. In this case, 3 points you begin the game with. And then any future characters that you roll are considered to be reincarnations of your very first character. And so they're going to adopt the karma and some of the knowledge that that character, had developed over their career. And they'll have access to that as they start to develop as well. It's kind of an interesting take in this game system, and in the setting that is here for MYFAROG. So your characters will start with 3 points. Now, when I come over here and I can see how do I spend those 3 points, one of them is racial background. So with all 3 points, I can freely pick my character race and species for the background. And that's going to be important because for a dwarven character, you can't just roll that up randomly. You actually have to spend points in order to unlock it. And so I'm going to show you. There is also bad karma, but that happens after you begin playing. So you're always going to begin with positive karma. So now I'm on page 10. So that was already pages 8 and 9. So now I'm on page 10, and you can see here are all of the races that are open to you. A dwarf, and this NA means that you cannot just roll it. If I roll a 1 to 20, I am going to end up with an elf on a roll of a 1, a halfling on a roll of a 2, a human on a roll of 3 to 20. So dwarves, gnomes, and orcs, and the subdivisions of orcs has to be purchased with those, with those 3 points initially. So once I've done that, I've decided, listen, I want to play a dwarf, and so now I have my dwarf character, selected basically. So now I come to the different racial descriptions, and they start on page 11. So I have dwarves here, and it explains the the legend and the lore of the creation myth of dwarves is here, and the same with elves and gnomes and halflings, including humans and the various types of subdivisions of human, orcs, and so on, and then the various types of orcs. So you have orcs, common orcs, goblins, which are a type of orc, a lesser orc, half orcs, which are a mixed breed orc, hobgoblins, which are known as greater orcs, and ogres, which are giant orcs. So if I had spent those 3 karma points, I'd be able to just say, well, my character is going to start off as one of these subcategories if I wish to do. So far, very, very simple, straightforward rules as far as, well, this is my character concept and this is the, my character race. Now we're going to get to probably one of the most complicated parts of it, and that's alignment. But once again, you can choose to use alignment or you can choose not to use alignment. You can choose to take a very simplistic approach to it, or you can get much more complicated with it. They're really, the choice is up to your game master and you as a player, how much you want to go into it. Now, instead of the very typical, lawful, chaotic, and neutral, or the 9 different categories of alignment, this game has a slightly different approach to it. It has contemplative and ecstatic; those are opposites. It has harmonic and disharmonic. It has spiritual and materialistic. It has sympathetic and unsympathetic, and then it has neutral. And so I kind of like these descriptions better than whether it be lawful good or chaotic neutral or something, because you kind of have a general sense of what the alignments actually mean if you understand the definitions of these particular words. So I like that. And I like that you can basically describe your character as being, well, he's, he or she is very materialistic or very sympathetic. And then when you get these combinations, so you can have various different combinations, which they call combinations of attitudes, and then those will give an overall alignment. And those overall alignments are then tied to the various deities. That actually comes a little bit later, various deities. And here they have racial alignments and what the various races will tend to have. So if I do have a dwarf and I just wanted to randomize my alignment, I can roll a d20, and then it'll say which of these alignments my character is most representative of. Or you can discard alignment altogether if you wish. Next, in MYFAROG, birth dates actually matter. All right, and one of the first rolls that you're going to do in the game, if you've decided not to do randomized racial, is you're going to determine what season your character was born in, because that will affect their attributes. So I rolled a 13. So my character was born in the summertime. All right, and that's going to give me a +1 to will. So when I come back to my scratch sheet here, I'm going to add another +1 to this, and now it's going to be a total of a 19. So like I said, in this case here, that 19 is the highest attribute that my character has. And so this is really going to become part of my character's overall concept and personality and such. It's going to play a role in how I depict that character. So continuing on, there are chances that if your character is actually born on the holiest day or the divine birthday of a deity, you will also be marked for that deity's birthday, and you'll get some advantage for it. So you do actually have to see what time of the month you were born on, so, or what time of the season, I should say. So I was born in the summertime, so now I'm going to roll a d6. I'll come down here, and I rolled a 1, so I'll be born in the month of Glitner. All right. Forseti is the deity, and I need to be born on the 13th of the month. All right, so now I know what month I was born in. I know what season I was born in. Now I have to find out what day I was born in, the day of the week. So I'm going to roll a d8. I'm over here on this page now, by the way. So I'm on page 16 now. I'm going to roll a d8 really quick. And I rolled a 2. And so I was born on a Monday. All right, so when I look at the possibilities of Monday, I have Monday the 2nd, the 9th, the 16th, and the 23rd. So it cannot be the 13th. So now I already know that my character will not be, marked by that deity as being born on his or her either holiest day or divine birthday. So now it really doesn't matter anymore, and I can move on forward. Attributes. So attributes is the next step, and I had already done this, ahead of time. But if you could see here, this first line, you can see the Dwarven attributes going across the board. Male or female doesn't matter, so there is no male or female attributes for any of the non-human races. There is a difference between human males and human females. All right, but all the others are straight up pretty much the same. Generally speaking, males and females have differences in charisma and strength and, intelligence or dexterity and such. Women tend to be, more stronger-willed, higher charisma, and in some cases, they get, they're equal across the board in other areas. And usually lesser amounts of strength, although sometimes they still get a bonus in strength depending on their class and their races. But generally speaking, they're either at a +0 or a -1 or potentially a -2 that I'm seeing here in some cases. But moving on, the size of the character will play a role. So dwarves are a -1 in size, and so that size modification will be factored into some of the other calculations that I do a little bit later on. We have the skill modifiers, which I had already written on that other page, and so it goes through that. There's some descriptions of some things here which really have nothing to do with character generation. They're just kind of like sidebar little, pieces of information that might be interesting to read. Special abilities is the next main section, and the special abilities are once again based on racial special abilities. So dwarves have a series of special abilities, and I would write these down on the character sheet. That way I have easy access to them. Elves have orcs, gnomes, halflings. Humans do not have any special abilities based on their race, so they're the most flexible as far as character roles are concerned, but they have the least special abilities or restrictions applied to their race. And then there's the skill modifications. So each race does begin with a number of skill modifications, with the exception of humans again. They're much more versatile, and so they don't end up with these, automatic skill modifications. But so when I look at dwarf, since that was my chosen, I'm going to get a +2 to skill modifiers on crafting, fortitude, a +4, +1 to mechanics, +1 to rune lore, +4 to stamina, and a -5 to swimming. All right, so once we've jotted these down on either your scratch sheet or your character sheet, we're going to come to the next category, and that's life stance. So there's two different life stances in MYFAROG. One is traditional and the other is religious. And most of the non-human races are strictly traditional, with the exception of halflings, where there are some halflings that are of the religious life stance. Humans are split basically 50-50 between the two stances. And the two stances allow you for certain things. So if you want to be a bard, you have to be a particular life stance. If you want a religious life stance. If you want to be a sorcerer, you have to be a traditional life stance. And life stances play a role in this setting in that there was some conflict between the religious and the traditional. In some cases, that conflict is very covert, behind the scenes. You really don't either notice it too much, but there's still that underlying current of unease. That's the best way that I can put it, or it could be overt. In other words, there's direct conflict and animosity between the two different life stances. Your character age. You have a starting age, and the starting age in MYFAROG really does start off fairly young. It's meant to be a time when people are just starting out their adventuring, or they're just leaving their villages for the first time. So a dwarf is going to start off at the age of 21, and then the maximum age is con times 30. Now, I want to just point out, when you see an attribute written in all capitals, that means that it is the main score, or the raw score of the Constitution. So in this case, my character has an 11 Constitution, so that would be an 11 times 30, or 330 years of age would be his maximum age. And his minimum age, obviously, he's starting off at the age of 21. Talents. Talents are different from skills in that your character will either start with, just the one talent at the beginning of first level, but additional talents can be purchased by adding flaws to your characters. Talent points are earned once every other level. So it'll be once on every odd level, and then skills can be increased once every even level. So you can gain a talent point you gain one at first, then everybody starts one at first, and then first, third, fifth, and so on. And you can select your talents. Now, your talents are going to give bonuses to skills. Some talents are requisite, and others are prerequisite. So a requisite talent, or a starting talent, let's say we take fighter. As you can see down here, if I took fighter for my dwarf character, he would have a +1 on melee attacks. Once he becomes a fighter and he has this talent at 3rd level, I could then add another talent point, and let's say I decided, well, I'm going to follow the fighter line and see what else I can do. So fighter is a prerequisite for fist fighting. And so now I'll add another +1 when using unarmed combat or battle gloves. And so now I'll be a +2 unarmed, as opposed to just a +1, and then a +1 for any other weapons that I happen to be using. I could add, I could take Heraclean, which is +1 melee when using concussion weapons, so maces or hammers or such. So there are a variety of choices that you can make here. And there's, as you can see, many different talents that you can pick for your character, and it brings in a lot of differentiation. So very few of these are cookie cutter. Flaws. Flaws, once again, you start off with 0 flaws, but you can purchase an additional talent for every 2 flaws that you choose to burden your character with. So let's just say, for example, I want to add another talent to my character. And so I'm going to roll randomly for 2 additional flaws, or 2 primary flaws. So I need my 2d10s. And once again, the black die will be my 10s, and the 4 will be, or the blue die will be my singles. So that is a 12. And so I will look here on this first page and see what a 12 is. So a 12 is a chronic pain. So something, at level 1, all of these flaws begin at level 1. So a level 1 chronic pain means something is constantly causing you pain. You suffer a -1 to your dexterity. So that's a pretty severe flaw. I'm losing a whole dexterity point. So I can even say that -14 is for the flaw. Actually, -1, which brings me to 14, would be that flaw. And now my second roll. I rolled a 38. So now I go to the second page here. And 38 is up here, and he's greedy. Now he already has the greedy flaw, being a dwarf at level 1. So now he could be pushed up to level 2. So level 2, instead of testing will, instead he tests will against a difficulty die of 10. All right, so fortunately he has a very high will. He has a 19 will. So he'll be able to avert his, this roll fairly easily, having such a high willpower. Because he'll take that full modifier of +4 and add it to his rolls, and he only has to beat a 10 in order to do that. So he'll have an additional trait and 2 flaws, one of which was, like I said, was really quite severe. Once you get beyond the flaws, now again, you could have chosen not to take any flaws at all, and we just eliminated 3 pages, from the 30 that you'd have to look through. Next, character roles. So human characters can choose between these character roles. They can be a civilian, a warrior, a stalker, a trickster, a ranger. And if they have the prerequisites, and in many cases these don't have that many prerequisites for, but if they have the prerequisites, they can be any one of these. For bards and sorcerers, they need to have, a much higher threshold for those prerequisites. So they're harder to qualify for them. But if they do, and they choose to take one of those, then there'll be, a significant amount of more detail that both the player and the game master will have to familiarize themselves with when dealing with characters that are bards or sorcerers. So we get here and we can actually see now what some of those prerequisites are. So for a bard, for example, it has to be a high man, religious life stance, a charisma greater than 16, and the marked talent. In other words, they can either select the marked talent, or if they were born on the same day as their favorite deity, or must be the same gender as their favorite deity as well. But they get the marked talent if they were born on the same day, or they can choose that as a talent earlier on in their creation. You just change their birth date. A female bard must remain a virgin in order to keep the character role. All right, so there are some role-playing limitations in that character role as well. And each of them have their own different variations of what they need in order to either keep that or maintain that role. Your characters can lose attributes along the way, and if they do lose attributes due to injury or some kind of a curse or whatever, they may lose the ability to function within their role. Moving on, so we have dwarf here. So like I said, we're doing a dwarf. level 1 dwarf, and so it describes everything that a level 1 dwarf has as far as their role advantages and their special abilities. And these level up just like any other skills do. So at level 5, a dwarf will have access to even more of an advantage for certain, different, special abilities or character roles. And then 10, and then 15. And so we have dwarves, elves, and each of the different races, the non-human races, have their different roles explained out. So just like old D&D, where you have humans and their character classes, and then you have elves, dwarves, gnomes, halflings are all separate character roles or separate character classes onto themselves. Then we get to character skills. And now I'm on here, page 31. I know you really can't see the bottom end where it starts with the dwarf skills. So dwarves start with climbing, crafting, foraging, fortitude, and so on. All right. And so you would check these, you would mark these off on the character sheet. And so each racial group has their list of character roles. When you get to humans, then it goes based on class. All right, and so here you have rangers, and what they start off with: sorcerers, stalkers, tricksters, and warriors. Some rules on what happens when you lose your character role. Once again, with bars and sorcerers, which is the next section, I'm going to save that for another time because they do become much more complex. They have to be assigned to a particular deity. They have certain weapon restrictions. Certain weapons are not just allowed, but they're required to be using or carrying, and so on. There's certain clothes of sacred colors that they must be wearing, and so on. So there are really two very different, more complex sections of character generation to deal with. Next, it goes into experience points and experience levels. So again, like older generation of Dungeons and Dragons, there are level caps placed on the different races. So dwarves are maximum normal level of 9, elves are 9, common orcs are 6, ogres are 5, and then humans range anywhere from 12 to 14 in some cases based on gender. Here are the warriors kind of listed kind of strangely. It says it's not applicable, so I guess the warrior, there is no limit on warrior for either or they're both level 12 warrior. Then it goes through just basically how to gain levels, and then degree of difficulty. That's where you determine skill checks and such, and then the dice results and how much experience you gain when you do a very hard task. You might gain experience points by completing a very hard task. You gain much less experience points by completing a easy task. Once again, how experience gets rewarded is just that's up to the GM and how he or she chooses to do that. We then get to the final calculations part. And the final calculations part is where we get to the character sheet, because that does take a lot of the numbers now that we've brought together and starts crunching those numbers a little bit more to determine some other details. So I'm going to bring that character sheet up here. And let me bring this down, and let me just show you some examples here. So Top of the chart is where you're putting your basic bio information for your character, biographical information. And then here you have your attributes, the true value, and then the modifiers, pluses or minuses. All right. These here get to, combat. And so when I do the combat video, I will talk about these more specifically. But OV means offensive value. ME is melee. Offensive value. MI is missile. Defensive value. Dodging. Total armor value. MS penalty, which is a movement penalty. Shield DV, that's defensive value. Melee, shield blocking chance as a percentage, and so on. So we have that, and like I said, I'll get to that a little bit later. For your skills, you're going to check off you're either unskilled, and then there is a modifier for being unskilled. Let me bring that down a little bit more, and let's see. So if I'm trying to act, acting uses charisma. Untrained, I'm a -2 in acting. All right, and then if I am trained, it gets rid of that -2, and then I just have my chance of modifier of what it's going to be. If it's a class roll, then once again I eliminated the untrained modifier to it. Some skills like acrobatics, based on dexterity, are no modifier for being untrained. And so everybody just basically does a dexterity check, adding their dexterity bonus if they have one to their check, and so on. So you have access to all of these skills, whether you're trained or untrained in them, and then so you can attempt anything. All right, it's just that in some cases you'll have a much harder time doing that. So like swimming, you'd be at a -5. All right, for attempting to swim if you do not have that skill. So some of the other calculations that I was talking about a little bit. Let's take a look at hit points, because hit points are very important in an RPG. And so let me just try to do this one modification. Wow, this is not lining up right. That's because this is a little bit wrong. And let's see if it catches up. There we go. Constitution, all capital, means you use the base score. So my character's base score of Constitution was an 11. So I'm going to have an 11. Plus the strength, but this is STR in lowercase. That means that it's going to be the strength modifier. My character has a 9 strength, so he has no modifier. So he's still at an 11 plus 0. His size is a -1. So he's going to have an 11 minus 1, and that's going to be a 10. And then his level modifier, his first level, so he'll have a +1. So his overall health points at the start of the game will be an 11. Same system with stamina points. Stamina points is the number of actions that he can take in consecutive rounds without starting to lose some steam. So he's going to start with an 8, a racial modifier. So I would apply any racial modifier for stamina that a dwarf has. I'm going to add his con bonus, not this con, but just the bonus of it, the modifier. So his constitution is at 11, so he has no modifier for that. And then his level bonus. So he would be an 8 plus a level bonus, so he'll have 9. So he'll be able to function perfectly okay for 9 rounds without any kind of a slow down in the action, without starting to suffer any level of fatigue. There are, disease, so it's constitution bonus or modifier plus a racial modifier, poison, constitution modifier plus size modifier plus racial modifier. And so you would just write the values in there, and that will tell you what their resistance are. Morale I'll get to when we're doing actual play, a playthrough, and showing you how combat and such works. So that, and I'll see if this gets caught up. There it goes. So here's a character sheet, and once you start filling in all of that, you can come to the back here, and it has equipment here, and you can put your favorite weapons and its statistics on here, your missile weapons and its statistics, then any clothing and notes that you want. So that is pretty much it as far as creating a character for MYFAROG 3.0. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm hoping I kept it kind of short. I know I've run through it twice now, trying to get it down to 30 minutes or less. Thanks for joining. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. And if you want to give MYFAROG a try, it's only about $12 on Amazon Prime. And so very quick, local shipping. And like I said, it's a full game in one booklet. You really can't beat that for the price. So once again, thanks for joining. I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. You all have a good afternoon.